You feel it when you wake up. That heaviness. That grey, flat, nothing feels right weight sitting on your chest before the day has even started. And your brain does what brains do. It reaches for a label. It says, I think I'm depressed. But what if it's wrong? What if the thing you're feeling, real as it is, heavy as it is, isn't depression at all? What if your brain has been misreading one of the oldest, most necessary human experiences as a disorder? What if you're just sad? That question sounds simple. It isn't. For the last 2 decades, rates of diagnosed depression have climbed steadily across the developed world. More people are in therapy. More people are on medication. More people describe themselves as depressed than at any point in recorded history. And yet the science tells us something uncomfortable. Most of what people are calling depression doesn't meet the clinical definition. Not even close. Psychologist Lucy Hone calls it the medicalization of normal pain. We've built a culture so allergic to discomfort that when sadness shows up, ordinary, appropriate, human sadness, we treat it like a symptom. We give it a diagnosis. We try to make it stop. But sadness is not a malfunction. It never was. Here's what actually happens in your brain when you feel sad. You experience a loss. A relationship ends. A plan collapses. Someone you love pulls away. Your brain's threat detection system registers the loss and signals. Pay attention. Something important just changed. Your energy drops. Your focus narrows. You become quieter, more reflective, more inward. This is not damage. This is design. Evolutionary psychologist Paul Andrews at McMaster University has argued that sadness evolved specifically to make you stop and think. When you're sad, your analytical reasoning actually sharpens. You ruminate with purpose. You examine what went wrong. You search for meaning. Your brain is not shutting down. It is doing exactly what it was built to do after a significant loss. Sadness is a signal. It arrives, it does its work, and then, and this is the critical part, it lifts. Depression doesn't lift. Say that again. Depression does not lift. Not on its own. Not with time. Not after the situation that triggered it resolves. Depression is not a response to something that happened. It is a state your nervous system gets locked into. A loop it cannot exit without help. Sadness moves. Depression stays. The clinical definition requires at least 5 specific symptoms present nearly every day for 2 consecutive weeks, causing significant impairment in your ability to function. Not discomfort. Impairment. You cannot work. Relationships collapse. Sleep is destroyed. You feel worthless, not because something bad happened, but because your brain has decided, chemically and structurally, that worthlessness is simply true. Researcher Helen Mayberg has spent decades mapping what she calls a depression circuit, a network in the brain that in people with clinical depression shows measurably abnormal activity. A loop that feeds itself. Negative thought triggers negative emotion, triggers negative thought, and the circuit has lost its off switch. Sadness doesn't do this. Sadness slows your prefrontal cortex. It doesn't hijack it. It does not steal your ability to feel pleasure entirely. It does not whisper persistently that nothing will ever be different. So why do so many people confuse the two? Because we live in a world that has declared war on negative emotion. Optimize your mood, protect your peace, remove low vibration people from your life. Sadness doesn't fit the aesthetic, so when it arrives, and it always arrives because you are a human being in a world that involves loss, it feels like something that shouldn't be there. And because we've absorbed the language of mental health without the precision of it, we reach for the nearest clinical word. We say, I'm depressed. The mislabeling causes real harm. When you call sadness depression, you pathologize a normal process and interrupt it. You spend your energy fighting the signal instead of hearing the message. And as psychiatrist Bessel van der Kolk has documented, the body does not appreciate being overruled. Suppressing ordinary grief often extends it rather than shortens it. But here's the other side, the one that matters just as much. There is a third thing your brain might be doing. Something that gets mislabeled as both sadness and depression and yet is neither. Bipolar disorder involves episodes of depression that look identical to major depression. The same heaviness, the same inability to feel pleasure, the same sense that this is just how things are now. But it also involves episodes of mania or hypomania, periods of elevated or irritable mood, drastically reduced need for sleep, racing thoughts, impulsive decisions, a feeling of being untouchably capable. The shift between these poles is the defining feature. Psychiatrist K. Redfield Jameson, who has both studied and lived with bipolar disorder, describes it as the brain cycling through completely different operating systems. 1 week, you cannot get out of bed. 3 weeks later, you haven't slept in 2 days and you've signed up for 4 new projects and you feel more alive than anyone around you. That pattern, the cycling, the contrast, the return, is the signal. Pure depression doesn't come with a manic counterpart. If you recognize the highs as much as the lows, that is important information. That is not sadness. And it is not standard depression either. It requires a different conversation with a different kind of specialist. So how do you actually tell which one is knocking? Ask yourself whether the feeling is attached. Sadness is almost always tied to something. A loss, a disappointment, a person, a version of your life that didn't happen. Depression often has no anchor. It is ambient. It fills the room regardless of what's happening around you. Ask yourself whether it moves. Sadness fluctuates. There are moments, brief ones, maybe just a few minutes, where it lifts slightly, where you catch a breath. Depression doesn't give you those moments, or if it does, it follows them immediately with a return to the baseline that feels worse for the interruption. Ask yourself whether you can imagine feeling different. Sadness can imagine it. Somewhere below the grief, it knows this is a season. Depression cannot imagine it. Depression has rewritten the future in its own image. And if you cannot imagine it, if the future looks exactly like today, flat and grey and certain, that is the moment to reach for something more than time. You woke up this morning with that heaviness on your chest. Your brain said a word. Now you know the word matters. Sadness asks you to slow down, to feel, to let the grief do its work. Depression asks you to get help before the circuit convinces you that help is something you don't deserve. And if the highs are part of the picture too, if the lows have a mirror image, that asks for something else entirely. Sadness is not your enemy. It is proof that something mattered. Depression is not your weakness. It is a medical reality that medicine can treat. The question is simply which one is knocking. And now at least you know how to tell the difference.